She died with a secret sewn into the hem of her dress. That's how they whispered it, the old crones who saw everything and said nothing. That's how the world remembers the wife of Amphitryon, not for her grace, not for her sorrow, but for her silence. And in that silence, a boy was born. Hercules didn't cry when he entered the world. Instead he stared, as if he already knew the pain he had been born into. He did not scream. He did not tremble. His fists were clenched like a soldier, even before he could stand. They wrapped him in linen and laid him beside a hearth too cold to offer comfort. His mother did not look at him. She stared at the fire instead, as if waiting for it to answer. In the distance, thunder murmured. Not a storm. Just a sound like regret dragging its feet across the sky. The boy blinked. His eyes were wide and dark and unblinking, like someone waiting for a command that would never come. And so the labor began, not with a lion or a monster, but with a silence too thick to break. No one called him Hercules yet. He had no name in those first days. He was only a burden wrapped in flesh, a symbol of shame for a woman who never asked for gods in her bed. She never whispered to him, never sang him lullabies. The nursemaids feared her silence more than they feared the baby's strange stillness. One morning they found a serpent coiled beside the cradle. It hadn't hissed. It hadn't struck. It had simply rested, like a guardian or a test. The child's fingers were wrapped around its neck. He wasn't crying. He wasn't even awake. The serpent was limp. No one spoke. They just stared at the boy and wondered how he could already kill without knowing how to live. His mother didn't ask where the serpent had gone. She didn't ask how the child had survived. Instead, she folded the news into the crease of her memory and let it rot there. Hercules grew in silence. Not unloved, just unacknowledged. The halls of the house echoed with everyone's footsteps but hers. The child learned to walk following the nursemaid's shadows. He learned to eat by mimicking the old cook. But he never learned to laugh. Even as he toddled through the olive grove, he carried a gravity no child should bear. And that gravity came not from prophecy or strength, but from knowing, somehow, that joy was a luxury not made for him. The villagers whispered. They said the gods had cursed him, or blessed him, depending on the weather. One priest dared say aloud that fate had simply misplaced him, as if Hercules belonged to some other story and had wandered into theirs by accident. And perhaps he had. He didn't look like the other boys. He didn't play like them. He stood by himself under the olive tree while others laughed in dust. When a boy tossed a stone at him, he didn't flinch. The stone stopped midair, struck a branch, and fell. No one saw Hercules move. But after that day, no one threw another stone. He never spoke of it. Not then. Not ever. But inside that child was a growing weight, like someone marking debts in a ledger only he could see. Each slight, each silence, each sidelong glance etched itself onto his bones. When strangers came, they said, "What a strong boy." When family passed, they said, "He never smiles." Both were true, but neither were stories. And still, no one gave him a name. Until one day, a traveling bard paused at the sight of him and muttered, "That boy labors like a god." And the name slipped quietly into the world, not as a blessing, but as a prophecy dressed in understatement. They called him Hercules now. The name followed him like a shadow, long, loud, and impossible to escape. But the boy hadn't changed. He still woke before dawn, still carried more than he should, still answered no one. His strength grew without ceremony. One morning, the old cook found him lifting a water basin twice his size. Another day, a stone path cracked where he stepped. It was not glorious. It was quiet, terrifyingly quiet. Hercules never boasted, never laughed. His face was the same, unreadable, unwavering. At 12 he was taller than men twice his age. They whispered it was Zeus's blood, but he never asked who his father was. Not once. As though the answer didn't matter. as though it would never help him unlearn what he already knew. That strength didn't heal, didn't love, didn't save. It only endured. And that endurance had no fanfare. It was a silence that pressed on, step by impossible step, long before the labors began. They gave him tutors, scholars, masters in music, in war, in poetry. Hercules listened to them all with the same expression, neither bored nor eager, just still. When he struck the lyre, it snapped. When he read verse, his voice was deep but hollow. The sword, however, did not break. The sword hummed in his hand like something remembered. One day, the master of arms watched him lift a blade forged for kings. It didn't tremble. It bent the light around him. And the master said nothing. Just stepped back, as if something sacred had entered the room. Hercules didn't smile. He only nodded once, not in pride, but acknowledgement. This was the first time something felt natural. Not joy, not triumph, but familiarity, like the sword had always been waiting for him. Like it belonged. And that was the most frightening thing of all. One night, a wild boar wandered too close to the village. It was massive, tusks thick as a man's arm, eyes red with moonlight. The men gathered spears, but the boy stepped forward first. He didn't ask, didn't speak, just walked. The boar charged. The earth shook. The air tore. But Hercules didn't flinch. He moved with calm precision, sidestepped the tusks, and brought his arm down like a falling star. The boar collapsed. Silence followed. No applause. No cheering. Just the sound of breath, ragged, disbelieving. The boy looked at the beast, then at the villagers. His face was unchanged. He did not gloat. He simply turned and walked away. And in that moment, everyone understood. This was no child. This was something else. Something heavier than blood. He didn't kill for pride. He killed because he had to. His mother finally spoke. Not to him, but about him. He frightens the gods, she said to no one in particular, as if explaining a bruise that never healed. Hercules heard her. He was sharpening a blade at the time. He paused. Not in anger, in understanding. It made sense. He frightened everyone. The villagers, the tutors, even the animals. He hadn't been taught fear, but he recognized it in their eyes. And still, no one warned him about what was coming. About the rage inside him, cold and patient, buried beneath obedience. That night, as stars pierced the black sky, Hercules sat alone by the fire. The blade gleamed beside him. His eyes stared into the embers. Not searching. Waiting. For what, he didn't know. But it would come. It always did. First time he saw blood on his own hands, it wasn't the boar's. It wasn't a beast at all. It was a boy. An accident. A game turned sour. A moment too fast. One blow too strong. The other boy didn't rise. Hercules stood there, hands outstretched, trembling for the first time. Not from guilt. From recognition. This was what they feared. This was the cost of strength without boundary. No one punished him. They said it wasn't his fault. But something inside him disagreed. That night, he washed his hands 5 times. The blood was gone. The memory wasn't. From then on, he kept his distance. Not because he was dangerous, but because he now knew it was true. And once a truth is known, it becomes a silence that never leaves. He left home before they asked him to. The silence between him and his mother had stretched too long, like a thread on the verge of snapping. She didn't say goodbye. He didn't expect her to. He walked at dawn, barefoot, sword slung across his back. The world was wider than he imagined. Hungrier, too. He saw beggars with gods' names and kings who feared sleep. He spoke little. He listened always. In taverns they laughed when he said nothing. Until one man reached for his sword. Hercules didn't lift a finger. He only looked. The man froze. Sometimes silence speaks louder than any weapon. Still, he kept walking. There was no destination. Just the weight of his own name, growing heavier with every village, every gaze. One child whispered, "Is he the one?" And his father replied, "No, the one would look more like a hero." Hercules kept walking. His feet bled, but he never stopped. In a quiet village, a lion stalked the hills. The people had stopped tending their fields. Doors barred before sunset. No one hunted. They waited for the gods, but the gods did not answer. Hercules did. He followed the clomax, the broken branches. No armor. No prayers. Just the breath in his lungs and the calm in his hands. He didn't trap the beast. He met it face to face in a clearing. The lion roared, enough to shatter bones. Hercules stepped closer. Light wasn't seen, only heard. Snarls, grunts, silence. When he returned, the lion's pelt dragged behind him. His eyes were swollen, his hands torn, but his steps never faltered. The villagers stared. No cheers, just awe. And one old man whispered, "He fought it barehanded." Hercules did not correct him. What mattered was not how, only that it was done. They offered him gold. He refused. They offered him food. He nodded. Then he left. Hercules never lingered. Praise felt foreign. Kindness made him uneasy. He traveled to another town, where rivers had dried and tempers burned. A woman screamed at the market, her jug broken, her son silent. The boy had vanished in the reeds near the poisoned stream. Hercules didn't wait. He followed the footprints alone. Hours later he returned, soaked in river mud, carrying a silent, sleeping child. The town didn't ask how. They saw the bruises on his arms, the bite marks. They knew. Hercules didn't stay for thanks. He set the boy down gently and walked into the setting sun. The mother tried to call after him, but the boy whispered, "Don't, he's not staying." And he was right. That night he dreamt of chains. Not iron. Guilt. They wrapped around his ribs, slow and unseen. In the dream, he stood in a hall of mirrors, each showing a version of himself, smiling, weeping, shouting, fleeing. None felt real. He reached out, and the glass cracked. When he woke, there was no light. Just the hum of crickets and the weight of sweat-soaked linen. He sat up, eyes sharp, breath steady. But something inside had shifted. Not fear, not clarity, not clarity. Just wait. He stepped outside, barefoot again. The stars above were cold. He wondered if gods ever looked down at their sons and felt shame. He wondered if anyone did. The wind stirred, and Hercules whispered to no one, "I'm still here." Not as a vow, just as a fact. Like a wound that never closed, but also never bled. They began to whisper about his labors, not as rumors, but as warnings. The boy who breaks beasts, the one who does not sleep, the godless child. Titles meant to explain what couldn't be understood. Hercules didn't notice, or he pretended not to. He carried water for old men, fetched herbs for sick women, fought when asked, vanished when praised. One evening, he sat by a cliff's edge, watching the sea churn. His feet dangled above rocks that had shattered better men. A fisherman sat beside him. "You ever afraid you'll fall?" he asked. Hercules replied, "No, only afraid I won't." And the man said nothing after that, just watched the waves. Some silences deserve to remain untouched. Some truths don't need to be named. Hercules never looked down again, only forward. He never intended to return home. But the gods love symmetry and cruelty. A message arrived. His family was dead. Not from plague, not from war, but from his own hands. Hercules blinked. "I was never there," he said. And yet, he was. They said madness took him, that Hera cursed his mind, that rage devoured reason. He saw visions of enemies where there were none. When he awoke, the floor was red, his mouth dry, his voice gone. He did not cry. He did not speak. He buried them himself, mother, children, wife. No tombstones. Just stones. One atop the next. His hands bled. He did not care. The grave was taller than a man when he finished. That night he sat beside it, blade untouched, fire cold. He whispered nothing. There was no one left to hear. Only the gods. And they stayed silent, too. He wandered for days after the burial. No food. No sleep. Just walking. The world blurred around him. Trees melted into one another. Rivers whispered his name and asked for nothing. He was not Hercules anymore. He was something stripped. A boy shaped like guilt. Eventually, he collapsed on a temple floor. He didn't know whose it was. He didn't care. The priest found him at dawn, shivering. He offered him bread. Hercules said nothing. "You are cursed," the priest whispered. Hercules nodded. The priest did not ask what happened. He only pointed to a mountain in the distance. "Redemption lives up there," he said. "Or at least the next thing." Hercules looked once, then stood. The mountain was far. Good. Wide. He was tired of being close to anything. The climb was cruel. Each step scraped his feet raw. The air thinned. The wind mocked. At night he dreamed of fire, not warmth but destruction. At daybreak he reached the top. A man stood waiting. Tall. Wow. Wrapped in black. No name, only a crown of laurel. 12 labors, he said. For what you've done. Hercules didn't speak. Not penance, the man clarified. Proof. Dying. Hercules raised an eyebrow. Proof of what? The man smiled without joy. That you can still walk forward. Hercules looked at the horizon. Endless, jagged, cruel. He exhaled. Fine, he said. And that was the first time in days he used his voice. It sounded unfamiliar, like it belonged to someone else. First labor was not a beast. It was memory. In a quiet cave, Hercules was told to retrieve a golden cloak, guarded by voices, not fangs. Inside, he heard laughter. His wife's. Then sobs. His mother's. Then silence. His own. He walked forward. The cloak hung from a spike of stone. Around it, illusions danced, his children playing, bleeding, gone. He reached through them. They did not flinch. His hand trembled. Still, he grasped the cloth. It burned cold. The voices vanished. Only his heartbeat remained, loud, ashamed, alive. When he emerged, the robed man asked, "What did you see?" Hercules replied, "Everything." The man nodded once. "Good. Then you're not done." Outside the cave, Hercules sat on the edge of a rock ledge. The cloak rested beside him, folded but heavy. It reeked of memory. Wind tousled his hair. His eyes didn't blink. He didn't cry. He never cried. But the cliff beneath him began to crack, not from weight but from tension. Like the mountain knew what he carried. The man in black sat beside him. "There will be more," he said. "Worse than this." Hercules said, "I know." The man asked, "And you'll keep going?" Hercules did not answer. He just stood, picked up the cloak, and walked away. The man did not follow. Some journeys are meant to be taken alone, especially the ones that try to destroy you. The next labor required no weapon, only hands. A beast made of bronze, unkillable, ancient, snarling through the hills like a rumor too old to question. Hercules tracked it by the sound of its hooves, metal striking rock, echoing like thunder. When he found it, the creature did not charge. It watched. Its eyes were not of an animal. They were reflective, like mirrors. Hercules stepped forward. The beast exhaled steam. The wind trembled. He lunged. His grip closed around cold metal flesh, slick with dust and rain. The struggle was quiet. No roaring. No fanfare. Just grinding, sliding, bone against bronze. At last he forced it down, using its own weight against it. It didn't bleed. It just stopped. And as Hercules stood, his arms shaking, he realized he wasn't wrestling a monster. He was wrestling permanence. And for the first time, it yielded. The bronze beast didn't vanish. It stayed still. Cold. Breathless. A relic of what had been conquered but never forgotten. Hercules left it behind. He didn't take trophies. His reward was silence. Days passed. The next trial came by water. A marsh infested with birds whose wings cut like blades. No sword could reach them. Arrows were useless. So he used sound. A clang of metal against shield, over and over, until the sky erupted with chaos. The birds screamed. Clouds scattered. And Hercules waited, catching them as they fell one by one. Feathers sliced his arms. Blood soaked his tunic. He didn't stop. When the silence returned, the marsh was empty. Not clean. Just quieter. Quieter was enough. Not all monsters were animals. Some lived in labyrinths made of rules. For the third labor, Hercules was sent to fetch a sacred deer, untouched by man, glowing with divine shimmer. But he could not kill it. He could not harm it. Only capture. He chased it for days. Across valleys, forests, rivers. It always stayed just out of reach. Until one evening it paused. Looked back. As if inviting him closer. He knelt. Hands open, date. No weapon. No threat. And the deer stepped forward. Let him touch its neck. That was the labor, not catching a creature, but becoming something it would trust. When he returned with it, the priests looked disappointed. They had wanted blood. Hercules offered stillness instead. They sent him to cleanse stables next. It sounded simple. It wasn't. Decades of filth. Rotting hay. Rivers black with waste. No man could do it in one day. That was the joke. But Hercules didn't use strength. He used change. He broke the walls. Diverted rivers. Let the water do the work. When the filth was gone, the king was furious. You cheated, he said. Hercules didn't answer. He had completed the labor. The method wasn't what mattered. Only the result. That night, as the water flowed past him under starlight, he thought of the blood on his own hands. Maybe nothing was ever truly clean. But maybe it could be made less filthy. That would have to be enough. He woke before the sun. His body ached. Hands blistered. Scars now layered over other scars. But he stood anyway. The fifth labor was complete. More weighted. Each one heavier. But something inside him shifted. Not strength. Not pride. A kind of quiet refusal. To be named only by what he survived. At the riverbank, he saw his reflection for the first time in weeks. He looked older. Not just in face, but in silence. As if every labor etched itself into his voice, his eyes, his memory. He didn't smile. But he didn't look away. That was new. That was enough. For now. The sixth labor was a trap disguised as mercy. Retrieve the man-eating mares of Diomedes. Not slay them, not wound them, but take them. They were chained to a post beneath a gray sky, eyes wild, mouths red from flesh. Hercules watched them snarl. He didn't draw his blade. Instead, he unhooked the chain. The horses reared, screamed, charged. But he didn't run. He grabbed the first by the mane, pulling it down with force that bent air. One kicked his ribs. He grunted but did not fall. The second tried to bite. He turned and struck its jaw, not to kill, to lead. Minutes passed. Then hours. At dusk, they stood still, not tamed, but waiting. Something in him had broken. Something in them had listened. It wasn't triumph. It was tension, stretched thin enough to hold them together without shattering. He did not lead the horses back. He walked beside them, step for step. Their hooves left dents in the earth. Their breaths steamed with old violence. Villagers fled as he approached. Mothers hid their children. One man crossed himself. Another cursed. Hercules said nothing. He wasn't guiding monsters. He was returning them to a world that had made them monsters. When he reached the temple, the priest refused to touch them. "Unholy," he whispered. Hercules simply tied them to a post and walked away. They did not resist. He never looked back. Some victories are so quiet they feel like loss. But that was the price. Not applause. Just completion. And a silence that followed longer than footsteps ever could. The seventh labor was a theft. Steal the belt of Hippolyta, queen of the warrior women. But when Hercules arrived, she did not draw her blade. She listened. They sat beneath a red tree. She asked, "Why do you labor?" He answered, "Because I killed." She nodded. "That's honest." She removed her belt, handed it to him. No blood, no duel. But when he turned to leave, the other warriors circled him. "A trick," they said. "A lie." Arrows flew. He did not attack. But Hippolyta did. She defended him. Fell in the chaos. Hercules caught her before she hit the ground. "Blood on her lips," she whispered. "Not all gods demand violence." He buried her in silence, left with the belt, and nothing else. By the eighth labor, his feet bled constantly. "Fetch the cattle of Geryon," they told him, a giant with 3 torsos and no heart. Hercules found him standing in a sun-bleached canyon, watching over his red-horned herd. "Come for a fight?" Geryon asked. Hercules said, "I came for the cattle." Geryon laughed, then charged. The fight shook the canyon. Dust became fog. The sun vanished behind blood-colored clouds. When it ended, Hercules stood, breathing hard, holding nothing. Geryon had fallen, not from rage, but from fatigue. Hercules didn't gloat. He simply whistled. The cattle followed him without protest. Maybe they understood what strength looks like when it chooses not to destroy. Maybe that was the real labor. He returned to the priest, delivered the belt, the horses, the cattle. No celebration followed. Just a nod. And another task. But Hercules no longer felt like a boy. His skin no longer fit as it once did. Something inside him had reshaped. He spent that night under an olive tree, looking up at stars too distant to offer warmth. He didn't ask for rest. He didn't ask for meaning. He only whispered, "I am still here." Not defiant, not proud, just present. A body still standing, a soul still carrying weight. The labors were not finished, but something else was. The part of him that needed anyone to say he was worthy. The silence agreed, and the stars blinked as if they'd been listening the entire time. The 11th labor wasn't loud. It was a garden. Golden apples guarded by a dragon that never slept. Hercules didn't climb walls or scale trees. He sat at the gate and waited. Hours passed. Then days. The dragon watched. Never blinked. But neither did he. Patience became his weapon. On the 7th night, a shadow approached. Atlas, the Titan. "You want what I cannot carry," Atlas said. "Then let me carry what you must," Hercules replied. He took the sky, literally, held the weight of heaven, while Atlas fetched the fruit. His arms shook. Bones ached. But he did not fall. When Atlas returned, he grinned. "I'll leave you like this," he said. "You won't," Hercules whispered. "Just one moment. Help me adjust." Atlas took back the sky. Hercules walked away, fruit in hand. No battle. Just balance. And the knowledge that sometimes you win by holding everything just long enough. The 12th labor was death. Not metaphor. Not poetry. Fetch the hound of the underworld. Hercules entered the land of shadows alone. No guide. No torch. Just his name, whispered by ghosts. He walked through memories. Past faces long buried. They did not speak. They didn't need to. He reached the river and Shara nodded. No coin was offered. None was asked. At the gate, Cerberus stood. 3 heads, each snarling a different sound. Rage, sorrow, hunger. Hercules approached. He knelt. Hands empty. The beast growled. Then whimpered. He reached out. Touched one head. Then another. And a third. No fight. Just recognition. Together, they crossed back to the land of the living. Death had seen him. Had not stopped him. And maybe that was the point. When he returned, no crowd waited. No priest recited a blessing. Just the same man in black, seated beside a cold fire. "They're done," Hercules said. The man nodded. "And so are you." Hercules frowned. "Then what's left?" The man looked at him, eyes old as stone. "You." Hercules sat. Not in defiance. In exhaustion. He had labored. He had lost. He had carried gods and guilt. And now, at the end, no one asked for anything more. That was the strange part. The end wasn't thunder. It was a whisper. No reward. No punishment. Just stillness. And in that stillness, he felt something loosen. Not pain. Not joy. Something deeper. Something that didn't need to be named. He didn't return to the temple. Or the towns. Or the sea. He walked into the hills, alone. Not escaping. Not hiding. Just existing. Some say he disappeared. Others say he became a god. But those who knew silence understood the truth. He became a boy again. Not by age, but by choosing to carry nothing. No labors. No names. Just himself. One night, beneath a sky so full it looked like it might crack open, he lay in the grass and whispered, "I forgive you." He wasn't speaking to the gods, or his family, or even the world. He was speaking to the boy who held snakes, to the one who broke, to the one who lived. And that boy listened. They still tell his story, but they never get it right. They speak of monsters, not mourning. Strength, not stillness. Victory, not the cost. They say Hercules conquered the world. But they forget, he also survived it. And survival is the greater myth. In the end, there were no songs. Just the wind. The grass. The weight of memory lifting. Just enough to let him breathe. He lived, yes. But no one ever looked him in the eye again. Because those who carry the sky, even for a moment, are never quite human when they come back down.